Why does the current world not have popular geniuses anymore? Because we live in a specialized world. Unlike in times past, discoveries were so novel it's broadcasted to the general public. We still have popular, really brilliant people, but only people in their respective fields know about them. You wouldn't know if someone created a revolutionary theory in a field you have no stake in, right? But every day that still happens all across all fields. It's just specialized and confined to those fields. There's an argument to be made that the low-hanging fruit has been picked. It gets harder from here. Smaller and smaller returns from bigger and more specialized investments. Regarding science, it's very rare that scientific discoveries nowadays are made by one singular person. It's more common that there are teams of hundreds from multiple universities working together with very expensive specialized equipment that make most major discoveries. And Picasso? We still have plenty of famous artists. Banksy, anyone? Remember that Mozart died in misery? And most scientists weren't that famous in their time. Being a scientist writer is already a full-time job. Being popular in media is a full-time job. So it's hard to do both. Don't get me wrong, science writer and other people working at popularization and education are doing a very important job. But doing both at the same time is almost impossible. 1. I think it's also because there are just too many geniuses, and we live in a time where information spreads so fast. Most of the things that get discovered will be forgotten in the collective memory because at the next day there is a new headline. 2. As many have pointed out, it's also history that decides who's a genius. Many famous people weren't that well known in their time. If you look at classical music, for example, the canon of music geniuses consists of the people of whom we have written pieces that were rediscovered in the 19th century. If you didn't write anything down, you were out of the game. So probably there were many people equally as talented as the ones we now regard as geniuses, but we have no record of them. Today everything gets published, so it's hard to stand out. I think it's a team effort more. For example, things like going to the moon require a lot of people and skills, and one person doesn't get so much credit. I also see AI in being an extension of that. The internet led to a removal of information gatekeepers. National broadcasters used to put intellectuals on prime-time TV slots. We're in an age where democratized media has, to paraphrase Isaac Asimov, led to a populist, anti-intellectual culture where your ignorance has the same value as my knowledge. These people exist. We just don't care, because we'd rather be entertained, and our civic discourse is so fucked that we dismiss the expertise, because it might rub against our preconceived ideological positions. A prominent Brexit slogan was "We've had enough of experts." Look at our politics, it's all ideological groupthink and very little honest pragmatism. A culture makes popular that which the culture values. We simply aren't interested in wisdom. Have you looked at history much? They are in our history books now, doesn't mean they were prominent, then those people were not seen as idols while alive necessarily, they were leaders in their field, sure. If that. And if you ask anyone today who's specialized in a field, they'd tell you the modern leader of that field. I doubt the average Joe knew more about Einstein back then than Elon Musk today. Einstein was a clerk, remember that. Terence Tao is pretty famous. You could understand Newton and, to some degree, Einstein, but science is now so complex that most people can't understand it. Unless it has a direct, huge impact on our lives or our imaginations, someone who would hypothetically make interstellar travel possible, even in theory. And you can't admire someone when you don't understand his work, and that is true of media also. This seriously limits the chances for anyone to be labeled as genius. Also, research became so complex that discoveries are a lot made by teams, often quite large. Complexity plurality equals no genius label granted. People can admire a football team because it's simple. And, without wanting to lecture or moralize, we have to reckon that there is a current trend to focus on futile things, and this affects the artistic aspect of the question also. Your question has been well answered. Hyperspecialization is the big reason. It is said that no one has known all of mathematics since Poincare, whom we call the last universalist. There's a few famous scientists still, but very often you become very famous in those fields by making very big breakthroughs and totally changing the field. There's just kind of less opportunity to do that right now. We're at a point where certain lines on physics and stuff are pretty well developed and projects are in big teams. We don't really have the equivalent of general relativity or nuclear weapons being invented. For some art and stuff, it's also important to know some of these people weren't recognized in their own time as geniuses. And yeah, I think less and less people are gonna call Musk a genius at this point, but you're right to say many of them are in private business at this point, and many would be in technology. So they do still certainly exist, but the answer of why they are not really popular at the same level is a lot because they are not like publicly working on World War II technologies affecting everyone. All of our geniuses are probably postdoctoral researchers working as lab monkeys for someone else 90 HRS a week instead of doing their own smart shit. Academia is now a fucking nightmare that only produces iterations on current research instead of allowing smart people to actually try the weird. A large reason for that is the fragmentation of attention due to the availability of information channels. Back in the old days you had a handful of newspapers, or say 3 main TV channels that everyone followed, so pretty much everyone was on the same page about world events. If you were, say, a sports fan, you'd sit down to watch TV and you might catch a news section or an art show before you get to watch sports. That's how someone gets to find out about the famous painter Picasso, even if they have zero interest in painting. However, now a sports fan can have his own personalized feed. He can choose to watch only sports commentary for example, without going anywhere near unrelated news. Brilliant people are still out there, Witten Terence Tao and Amir Iqbal being some examples. You just don't hear about them. BCZ their work is kind of complex to explain to a layman. They are out there getting called idiots by the masses for an unpopular opinion or two. Back then, astrophysicists were trying to figure out what revolved around what. Well, now with telescopes and math, we can solve that problem in an afternoon by watching the planet's direction. Now we're trying to solve more complex things like what is dark matter. The issues are far more complex than the sun is the center of the solar system. Michio Kaku is trying to solve string theory right now. Because guys like Einstein tends to say something like, the economic anarchy of capitalist society as it exists today is, in my opinion, the real source of the evil. Moreover, under existing conditions, private capitalists inevitably control, directly or indirectly, the main sources of information: press, radio, education. It is thus extremely difficult, and indeed in most cases quite impossible, for the individual citizen to come to objective conclusions, so we hear more about businessmen and billionaires. Wiki, sourceapes:/n.wikipedia.org. Wiki why socialism 3f. Calling Musk a genius is a hell of a stretch. We solved all the simple problems. Novel things take teams now.